Builders, it's Jenn here with JWM Designs and Marketing, and in this video, we are going to talk about startup costs. Yes, I think that startup costs are such an important topic for a lot of you out there who are just now getting started, whether it's in your DIY crafting business, your cleaning business, your website development business, whatever it is that you are doing, you're just getting started, or maybe you've already been going, but you're not entirely sure what startup costs are as opposed to expenses and what that means. And so in this video, I want to talk about what startup costs are, but I also want to talk about my experience when I first started JWM Designs back in 2017. I know some of you guys have been waiting for this video because I've mentioned it in some of my Instagram lives, and so I want to talk about startup costs and particularly what I used, how I used a spreadsheet to help me get things together. And I know that it's going to be helpful to you. But before we go ahead and dive into the meat of this video, go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel and make sure that you click the little button so that you can get alerts when I have new material that comes out. I am trying to make sure that I continue to supply you guys with relevant, helpful information. As most of you know, I do have a playlist going on right now where I am giving out really great tips and tools as it relates to intellectual property for your business. So be sure to make sure you check those videos out as well. I've got a few on starting your business, business plans, and a couple of other things, and I've got some other really cool stuff that's going to be coming down soon. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, make sure that you are a subscriber to my channel, and let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. As some of you guys already know, starting a business can be so overwhelming. I don't know about you, but I know in my experience, it was definitely an overwhelming process. Part of it being is because I had never been in that entrepreneurial space. Even though I was a business major when I was in college, and I took obviously business law classes when I was in law school, it was still a very new thing for me to start a business, especially from the ground up. Most of the time when we get employed by different employers, there's already something that's there. There are already systems, processes, things that you don't really have to think about when you are joining a new company. But when you're just starting something from the ground up, there are a lot of things that you have to do, those foundational things that matter. And a part of that is startup costs. Why now? Part of the reason that I decided that I wanted to do this video was because I know that since 2020, there have been a lot of new businesses that have started. While there have been a lot of businesses that closed their doors, a lot of people are realizing that they can do so much more from home. Whether it's their main hustle or their side hustle, they're starting to realize, hey, I can do certain things, whether it's DIY crafting, whether it's starting a home care business or a cleaning business, a website design, consulting, digital marketing. All kinds of businesses have been started over the last year. And for some people, it's very difficult to judge whether or not they're making a profit. Now, most of us who start a business, our goal is to make some sort of profit. And we all have different goals as to why we started our business. Some people have started their businesses to pay off debt, some to go on that lavish vacation that they've been waiting for, or others it may be to buy a new car or to get a kid through college. There are so many different reasons why we start our businesses, but the main thing is that most people, you want to turn a profit. You want to be able to see that the fruit of your labor come in and that you're able to enjoy that. But how do you know if you've reached that point, if you haven't really understood how you got started and where you're starting from? And so that's where startup costs really come in. They help you understand your starting point, what it is that you need in order to get your foot out that door and get to making new customers happy, getting your name out there, getting that name recognition. Now, before I go into that too much, I want to make sure that you understand the difference between a startup cost and an expense. So what is a startup cost versus what is an expense? Startup costs are those sorts of things that, like I said, you need to have in order for you to get started. Here's an example. If I were a photographer, one of the main things that I'm going to need is to invest in a camera. There's no use to me saying that I'm a photographer and I don't own a camera. Now, it doesn't have to be the latest and the greatest, most expensive camera, but I do need a camera. Those are one of those things where that expense or that cost of having that camera so that I can eventually open my photography business is very important. But an example of an expense, that might be the memory cards or extra memory cards that didn't come with the camera, or extra cords, or some of those other smaller things that you don't necessarily need in order to get started, but they are also very helpful in helping you to do business. And I'll go more into that as I show you my spreadsheet from when I first started JWM Designs. One thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that startup costs are like that initial investment. There are so many different barriers to entry in any sort of field, whether you are going into law, if you're going into becoming a doctor, a psychiatrist, if you're going to become a cook. There are so many different barriers to entry to get into whatever field that you're getting into, whether it's in the entrepreneurial space or it's in just the basic business space. And so what I want you guys to take away from this video is understanding what the barriers of entry are as it relates to those startup costs to get you out of the door, so that you know, hey, I don't need to be overwhelmed in having every single gadget, gizmo, or trinket that could help me in my business. I only need to start off with those things that are the must-haves. And that's what I really want us to focus on in this video. To tell you a little bit more about my story, when I started my business back in 2017, I was working at a firm and I started finding that I was a bit bored in my career, as some of you probably have experienced yourself. And so I picked some hobbies and things that I thought were interesting, and I kind of followed those out. And one of the things that really stood out to me was website design, particularly within the WordPress space, and digital marketing, and just getting to understand that. Now, I never thought I was actually going to start a business doing it, but as I was learning more about it and about how to do it, I saw the real potential in it. And that might be the same for you. Maybe you made a t-shirt with vinyl, or you bought a Cricut machine or a Silhouette, or maybe you bought a Glowforge or some other machine or some utensil and you thought this was cool, something that you could do. It became a hobby. Then you started getting an audience. People were interested in what you were doing, and you found that there was a need or a desire for what you were making. And that's the same thing that happened with me back in 2017. And so when I decided, you know what, I see that there's a potentiality here for me to have a profit, for me to make a little extra money, maybe to get my hair done, to go buy some of those things that I want, whatever. I decided, hey, let's just go ahead and let's really see what this looks like. And so what I want to do real quick is I want to share with you the startup cost sheet that I had, because like I said before, when I was in college, we talked about businesses, but they were businesses that were established. We didn't focus so much on entrepreneurship, or anything like that. So building up a business, what it takes, all of that kind of stuff, we didn't really focus on that. And so I was kind of behind the 8 ball on it, like probably a lot of you, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay that way. So let's take a look real quick at what I did when I first started JWM Designs. As you can see, when I first started JWM Designs, I anticipated an initial investment of $5,000 with what I needed in order for me to get started. And now that may not necessarily be the amount that you need to get started. Additionally, when I look at this list now, there are quite a few things on that list that I really didn't need, but at the time I really wasn't sure because it was a brand new area for me, and so I was getting a lot of advice from a lot of different places. And so I want you to not make some of the same mistakes that I did and invest in things that you don't need. But I want you to look at this list and I want you to take a look at it, because I'm going to have a Google Sheet for you that's a free open template for you to be able to have access to it as well. And you'll be able to fill this out for yourself and for your business. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. As you can see, I have a list on the left side, which has the item name. I put the next column is the cost of that item. The middle column is the next column is where I paid. Then I have the expenses, recurring versus one-time, necessity level, and notes. Once I added it all up, it was about $5,000 that I figured I needed to completely do what I wanted to do as far as starting JWM Designs. And so I'll kind of go over some of those things with you. Because I am a licensed attorney, it was not too hard for me to go ahead and make sure that I did the incorporation filing paperwork. And so the only thing I really needed at this point was $100, which is what my state requires for me to pay the $100 for me to have it licensed. And so I did that. The redacted areas is just what I used to pay for those things. And so obviously I didn't want to put all that stuff on the interwebs, but that's it. But I also put the date that I paid it, or the month that I paid it, and then the expense type. And you can have different things that you want to put there. I put business overhead because I just, that was just the label that I made, but you can do some other things like business organization. There are different tools or different things that you can do if you want to, label it whatever you want. But that's what I chose. I just chose business overhead. The next column is the recurring versus one time. Recurring things are things that I knew that I was going to have to pay on a subscription base or something that's going to come every month. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Jen, how is the recurring not an expense? How is that a one-time fee? And I'll explain that. The difference between a one-time versus a recurring, at least as it relates to this sheet, is that with the one-time payments, those are things like the initial filing fee for incorporating my business. That's a one-time payment of $100. But as you can see, there's an asterisk next to it. And what that's all about is that there is a recurring fee that you have to pay every year, which is your annual renewal for that registration. And so that's why I wanted to make sure I made the distinction of that. But I had to do the initial $100, and so that's what's on the list, but I don't have the $50. If you look in the last column, it explains to you what that $50 is, and that it is a recurring fee that's going to come every year annually. So the next column is the necessity area. And I think the necessity column is so important because oftentimes especially when we're first starting our businesses, you think you need something that you really don't need. And there are a couple things that are on this list that unfortunately were not necessary, but I convinced myself that they were, and they became part of my startup costs. And I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. But I want to make sure that you know that I have it on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being definitely necessary and 1 being not necessary at all. If you are making out this list for yourself, make sure that you put necessary things, though they need to be things that are 4 or 5. 3, maybe a 3, but mainly it needs to be 4 or 5, because those let you know these are things I actually need to do my business. Like I was giving you the example earlier with the photographer. A photographer needs a camera. There's no way around it. So you need to make that initial investment in a camera. Now you can always upgrade that camera at some point in the future, but you need that camera for you to be able to do your photography business. And the last column is notes. In the notes sections, I sort of talked about what it was that I was buying, just so I had an idea of what it was. I didn't want to just put something like domain name and then like which domain name, because I bought honestly more than one domain name because at the time I wasn't entirely sure. So let me go through this a little bit and kind of tell you why I saw certain things as being necessities versus things not being necessities. The first thing was the incorporation paperwork. I needed that because I knew from the beginning that I wanted my business to be a business that was registered with the state and all that good stuff. So I made sure I had my incorporation paperwork. I needed my domain name because obviously I was going to have a website and developing company. I needed to make sure I owned the domain name for the name that I named my business after. Web hosting, which is what I use, is Flywheel. It's definitely my favorite web host for WordPress websites, and I've got a link in the description box for you to be able to take a look at that. Another thing that for me at the time was very important was a course that was focused on website developers, and it was a great course. It was very helpful when I first started out because it gave me a lot of the tools, tips, and things that I needed as a website designer to actually put the business together. The course was not about building websites and things like that. I took other courses that were for that purpose, but the purpose of this course was to actually help me build my business. And so that was a one-time expense, but definitely worth it. And I put that as a career development because honestly, that's exactly what it was. Logo and marketing designs, that's how much I paid for my logo. The Genesis Framework Developer, I was going to buy that, but I didn't. And as you can see, that space is still open because at the time I hadn't decided which of these different products I wanted to work with. And so that's why I hadn't purchased it. But now that company is actually owned by Flywheel, or there's some kind of relation. So there's definitely something going on there. I just haven't really looked into it, but it's all good. The next thing I purchased was the email service. So I know that a lot of people, and I currently now use Google Workspace, but before Rackspace was a very good service as well, and they still are a good service. And so Rackspace is what I use for email. I had to have a business license for where I lived, and I know that there's an annual fee for that, so I have that noted in the notes section. Rockstar Empire was another course that I took that was related to the WP stuff. also still very good in helping me build online courses, and it's helped me a lot as far as getting my things structured and understanding the ins and outs of running a business. Another thing that I purchased at the time, but I don't use it anymore, is Active Campaign. It was way too cumbersome for me, but I know a lot of people who enjoy it. So it's definitely, it's a good product. It's just not one that works for what I need. The same thing for Sife. Sife, I use that, and it's not a bad product, but I realized later that's one of those things that I didn't know. But again, when you're first starting out, you don't know what products you necessarily need or don't need. And so that was it. Then I had several Namecheap because I bought several different domain names. And so I bought them with Namecheap because I really like Namecheap as a company. And then the next thing is one of the things that I was trying to tell you guys about, which was that Association of Professional Women. That was such a waste of money. I'm not saying that they're a bad organization, but as far as the startup costs and things that I need, that was definitely $200 I could have saved. And it was definitely not a 4 like I made it. It was probably a 2. And even that's probably being generous. Some of the other things on here are just like some of the different forms. Beaver Builder is what I still use. I absolutely love Beaver Builder. And some of the other themes and some of the different services that I use, they are all subscription based for the most part. And so I have an annual fee that I pay once a year, but definitely worth it. And I started all of those then. And then there are some things I really like too, which is with AppSumo. I kind of became obsessed with AppSumo for a short while because they had these lifetime deals that you can use. And so I used quite a few of those. And as you can see, those were lifetime deals that I bought. Some of those things are really great, some not so great anymore. AirStory used to be a really good service, but they sort of aren't there anymore. But there's another company that's kind of replaced that. Better Proposals, I used them a lot, but now I use a different service, but it was still a good purchase at the time. And then lastly, I had some more courses that I took that were development courses and that kind of thing. So as you can see, when you add it all up, there are some things I probably could have saved on and some things that I use now that I probably could have used back then. But again, I was brand new to all of it, and just like you live and you learn, you made some mistakes, but the whole point of it is that you get out there, you look at what those prices are, compare prices, look at what other people in your arena, in your industry are using, ask questions, ask for reviews, look for free trials just so you can see and not make some of the mistakes that I made when I was first starting out. So you might be asking yourself, well, Jen, do I, if I've already started, do I even need to worry about startup costs? My answer would definitely be yes, because you still have to pay taxes. You still need to know what your books are. If, let's say, you wanted to say that your initial amounts that you had invested in your business, you want to recoup at least that amount, you need to know, well, how much was that number? Have I even made money back to cover the amount of money that it cost me to get started? Another thing that's very helpful too is to see, hey, am I able to double that investment? Because that's what initially startup costs are. That's your investment in your business. You want to be able to track some of those numbers and those matrices because that's going to help you to be able to see if your business is growing, if it's stagnant, if it's time for you to make some changes. And so definitely want you to use the link that I have in the description box below so that you can go ahead and start seeing, did you, what all amount of money did you invest in your business to actually get started? We're going to do another video soon that's going to talk about monthly expenses and how much does it actually cost to run your business. But you should actually have an idea of how much it costs for you to get your business started. So why is, saying, hey, I'm not going to worry about startup costs. I've already started business. It's not that big of a deal. Why is that such a bad idea? Well, in my opinion, I think, like I said before, it's a bad idea because how do you know that you have made your money back? Let's say you invested $2,500 in a glow forge because you really like glow forges, and that's cool. But do you want to know whether or not you've made the money back that at least covers the cost of your glow forge, that you've at least made enough of a profit that you have covered the cost of that? Because then if you decide to quit the business altogether, or you don't want to sell anything anymore, you can at least know that you have broken even. And that's something I think is just important in business and in your experience as an entrepreneur. You should be able to track those things. What if one day you might want to get investors or people to be more involved in your business? They're going to want to know, well, how much did it cost you to get started? And where are you today? If you ever need to get a loan or anything like that, these are all important matrices that people look at. And so you want to make sure that you've got the correct numbers and that you actually look at your business and the health of your business. So let's recap. In this video, we talked about the difference between startup costs and expenses, and I went over the JWM Designs startup cost sheet that I created back in 2017 when I started my business. Your action steps are to download and use the startup sheet, Google sheet that I shared with you, and start plugging those numbers in. Make sure that you are mindful of all of those different columns, particularly the the necessity column. That column is one of the most important columns because that may be the judge between whether or not it's a startup cost you need to invest in or not. Don't make the same mistakes that I made when I thought this is so important. I need to make sure that I have this in, my business, when honestly I didn't, and there was money that I could have saved if I would have known that I didn't need it. Alright guys, I hope that you're finding these videos helpful and informative as you continue to navigate the journey of transitioning from being a full-time employee to a full-time entrepreneur. I hope that this video was helpful as you're getting your mindset ready for your startup costs and making sure that you are on the road to success for your business, however you define success for yourself. Don't forget to like this video and make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you can get the latest on the updates or any of the new videos and content that's going to be coming out. I plan to continue to roll out more information for you. I also plan to do a few YouTube lives so that you guys can stay in contact with me, and if you've got questions, please do not be afraid to leave a comment here. Also, don't forget that you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and all of my information is in the description box below. I am so excited for you guys to start your businesses, so excited to see all of the awesome things that you guys are doing in 2021. Y'all, we are halfway through this year. Can you believe it? So let's make those last 6 months the best 6 months, right? We got a whole year we got to make up for it because 2020, a lot of stuff didn't happen that we all planned on. So let's make 2021, that second half, our best second half. Alright guys, that's it for this video, but until the next video, keep building, y'all.